Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to have a look at another collaboration beer. So this one is half Japanese on the home side, half American on the away side. Both of these breweries have featured on the channel a couple of times before, albeit I think the Japanese one a bit more frequently than the American one. So when it comes to the Japanese brewery, these guys are one of the classic Japanese craft breweries in my opinion. They do some really nice beers. I've had quite a few different styles from them, and I think it's just fair to describe this brewery as being very well-rounded. Whatever they try always seems to go pretty well for them. When it comes to the American brewery, these guys are one of the really quite old school and quite famous Californian breweries. They do some really, really nice kind of West Coast IPAs, and I do need to review more of their beers here on the channel. But when I saw this one as a collaboration, I thought this would make for a really interesting video. So it seems that I kind of timed my visit to Japan quite well for this one. But yeah, this beer is a style that I really quite like. It's one that I don't think we see enough of these days, but hopefully we will see some more of them over the next little while. But needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to a little place called Yamanouchi in Nagano Prefecture to the northwest of Tokyo, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Tamamura Honten and their Shiga Kogen beer range. So this particular beer is called 1 in 1,000. It comes in at 7% ABV, and this one is a West Coast IPA brewed in collaboration with Pizza Port Brewing Co from Carlsbad, just outside of San Diego in the southern part of California in the western US. So yeah, this should be pretty cool actually. This is a very recent release from Shiga Kogen beer, and I bought this one at my usual haunt, which is liquor shop Asahiya in Taishibashi Yamaichi in Osaka. A big shout out to Koji-san and his daughter Rika who run the shop there. They've always got a great range of Japanese beers. They did have quite a few this time that I hadn't seen before. Quite a few new breweries that I'll need to check out the next time I come out here. But yeah, I only had time to film a few things when I was over this time. So I went with breweries that I knew. But yeah, very much looking forward to this one. Always nice to return to Shiga Kogen beer, and Pizza Port, like I said, are a brewery that I need to cover a little bit more. But let's get cracking with this one then and see what we have. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery websites, the link to my other reviews that I've done, both from Tamamura Honten, Shiga Kogen beer, and from Pizza Port Brewing, and we will no doubt add more to those lists at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated. And as always, remember you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. Just go to the search bar, and if I've reviewed beers from your hometown, city, state, county, province, prefecture, they should pop up. Failing that, you can of course check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Japanese and American playlists because it is dual nationality. So yeah, let's go on then and have a little look at my brewery notes. And we'll start off with Tamamura Honten Shiga Kogen beer, since they are the home brewery in this case. So, Tamamura Honten, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Yamanouchi in Nagano Prefecture, which is a few hundred kilometers to the northwest of Tokyo, the Japanese capital. But this area is very well known for its ski slopes and for its hot springs. The Tohoku region is supposed to be absolutely beautiful. It's one of the places that I still need to visit in Japan actually. But the Tamamura Honten company actually began brewing sake back in 1805, and after the kind of how would we say, the reforms of the law in 1993, not long after that, they started brewing beer under the name Shiga Kogen beer. This started in 1998, and when it comes to Shiga Kogen beer, it's quite often the case that you will have a parent company and then they sell stuff under a different brand. This is very common with beer brewing actually. So the Tamamura Honten company is the sake company's name, whereas Shiga Kogen beer is essentially the beer brand. And Shiga Kogen of course translates into English as Shiga Heights or Shiga Mountain beer. But these guys also produce a little bit of wine as well, from what I understand. But the head brewer at Shiga Kogen Beer is Sato Ego, who joined the company in 2003. And the idea to brew beer came when the number of skiers visiting the resort began to dwindle. And so in May of 2004, they applied for their brewing license and they received it 4 months later. So they bought their brewing equipment and trained for a week at a brewery down in Kyushu before beginning their own commercial activities, with only a consultant actually helping them. But needless to say, it went really quite well for them, and these guys are one of the really respected names in the Japanese craft beer scene. But one of the other interesting things about Tamamura Honten is that they produce their own hops: sake, rice, barley, buckwheat and blueberries. They actually have their own hop variety that they developed as well, called Shinzu Wazi, and this is a hybrid between Czech Sats hops and also a local Japanese variety. They do release a beer every so often that I think is made exclusively from that, so I will need to figure out which beer that is and see if we can try one, because that would be really quite interesting. I always love learning about new ingredients and things like that. But the brewery also has 2 tasting rooms, which they call Tepper rooms. There's one at the brewery itself, and there's also one at the Shiga Kogen Ichinose Hotel's Chalet Shiga. So we'll need to see about going up there and checking out one of those at some point in the near future. But the bottle art you'll see on the Shiga Kogen beers is quite distinctive. This is always designed by Tanaka Noriyuki, and as of December 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 115 different kinds of beer, according to Untappd. But, you know, as I said, Shiga Kogen Beer are doing some really interesting things. We've had some really interesting imperial stouts from them over the years. We've also had they've also got quite an interesting sour beer program as well, which is something we need to revisit at some stage in the future. I haven't seen one of those bottles in quite some time, but they sell these big 650, 700 milliliter bomber things that have sour beer, which are, you know, pretty damn good, I have to say. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about Tamamura Honten and Shiga Kogen Beer for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You'll need to use Google Chrome and translate it though, because it is in Japanese. But like I say, this brewery is definitely worth checking out. You know, so follow them on Facebook and Instagram to see what's going on, and you can also check out the Rate Beer and Untappd pages to learn more about the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's go on to the American side of things then, and Pizza Port Brewing Company. So Pizza Port Brewing Company, as I've kind of mentioned to you already, are based in San Diego in the southern part of California in the southwestern US, and the company was founded by siblings Gina and Vince Marsaglia when they bought a struggling pizza place in Solana Beach back in March of 1987. So they had some free space in the premises, and so Vince started experimenting a little bit with home brewing, and a few years later they installed a 7-barrel brew kit, and the first beers were produced in October of 1992 for commercial sale. But over the last few years, they've been expanding the company with new restaurants. There was one in Carlsbad, which opened in 1997, one in San Clemente, which opened in 2003, Ocean Beach in 2010, and then also Bressi Ranch in Carlsbad back in 2013. They also opened a bottle shop across from the Carlsbad location in 2008, and over the course of their history, they've won various medals and awards, and they're widely regarded as having been very influential in developing the San Diego beer scene, and their restaurants are rated as one of the best places to have beer in the US, so they're definitely on my radar for out and about videos in the future. But the majority of their production these days takes place at the Bressi Ranch facility in Carlsbad, and as of December 2022, when we're filming this review for you, these guys have produced apparently about 1,800 different kinds of beer, according to Untappd. They probably are best known for their different West Coast IPAs and things. You know, the Swami's IPA is probably one of their most famous ones, and we reviewed that on the channel a few years back. But yeah, that was really quite a nice one, I have to say. So yeah, I think that's everything I can really tell you about Pizza Port Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, once again, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on then and have a little look at the beer itself. So yeah, there was a good little bit of blurb on this beer on the Untappd page, and when I read it, it was quite interesting because Sato was basically talking about how they've done 2 collaborations with Pizza Port Brewing to celebrate their 1000th and 1001st brew at the brewery, and this apparently is the most heavily hopped IPA that they've ever done at Shiga Kogen beer, but at the same time it's not supposed to be overly bitter, which is kind of interesting. So this is probably going to be a more kind of modern take on the West Coast IPA rather than a really old school kind of big bitter 80-90 IBU sort of thing. We have had some really nice West Coast IPAs from Shiga Kogen beer over the years. Probably one of my favourite beers I've ever had from these guys would be the Sonoju, which is their 10th anniversary IPA, and they do have one or two others that I need to check out at some point as well. The House IPA is one that I've never reviewed on the channel, but it was I have had it on tap once or twice, and it is very nice. But like I said to you, this one is a 7% West Coast IPA. It's got a mixture of New Zealand and American hops in it, this one, and I think that was everything that he said in the little blurb from what I remember. But yeah, we can get on and have a little look at the beer itself. There you can see the Tamamura Honten company symbol with the dragon, looks very, very nice. There you can see the Pizza Port symbol, and you can see one in 1,000, which I think is pretty cool. So yeah, this one is a 300 and I want to say it's 330 milliliters. This beer I think cost me 600 Japanese yen, so that's about $6 American. That's going to be then about what, €5, about £4.50 sterling. So yeah, you know, craft beer is a little bit more expensive in Japan because of the malt tax and things, but yeah, what are you going to do? We love our beer. That's just how it goes. So yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass and see what we have then. 1 in 1,000 West Coast IPA from Shiga Kogen beer and Pizza Port Brewing. This should be very nice. Very much looking forward to this. I think we got a nice pour out of that. That's good. So yeah, anyway, let me just line that up again so that my OCD is happy. So, yeah, as you can see with this one, it's poured with a lovely, probably 2-finger frothy, I would say kind of creamy coloured head there. You can see it's got some really nice kind of small foamy bubbles toward the bottom of the head there, and a few bigger ones as you move kind of further north, if you like. But yeah, colour-wise, this beer looks very, very nice. I would describe this one as being a kind of rich yellow colour. You know, this is definitely not unheard of when it comes to West Coast IPAs. For me, there are two ways a West Coast IPA can lean. They can either be more kind of bready and biscuity, such as, you know, Russian River Pliny the Elder, or they can be more sort of oily and caramelly, such as the Sierra Nevada Torpedo. I get the feeling from the colour of this one that it's going to be more like the Russian River Pliny the Elder kind. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar's caramelised, thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will affect the colour of the beer too. But yeah, you don't normally have to care about those two variables when it comes to IPAs. But yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass there. A few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head. But overall, it does look really nice. And you can see this beer does have that kind of natural haziness to it. So unfiltered, of course. But yeah, in terms of what you expect from a West Coast IPA, nothing particularly surprising about the appearance here. So let's take a wee look at the aroma and see what we get out of this one then. Oh yeah, I'm going to say straight away, very, very familiar smelling beer, this one actually. You know, I'm going to say that it gives you everything you would want from it does really give you everything that you would want from the West Coast IPA style. But you can tell straight away it is a more modern take on that style actually. You're not getting quite as big a dank, deep green component to this one, but you are getting some of the breadiness, you're getting a bit of the sweetness, and you're also getting those kind of oily, fruity characters. So yeah, I think this is going to be quite a nice one actually. And that was one of the things that Sato wrote in the blog for this beer. He said that one of the things he was told by Vince was, you know, stay relevant, you know, do a beer that is relevant for the times. And I think that was the idea behind doing the more modern take on the West Coast IPA. Personally, I miss the big bitter beasts, but that's just kind of how it goes sometimes, you know. But yeah, aroma-wise, let's break this down for you a wee bit and describe it more in depth. So, the backbone of this beer, absolutely, you get a nice little bit of that kind of fresh, white bready bread crust coming out of it, and it's absolutely lovely. That's the backbone of beer, fresh, white bready bread crust. I do quite like this. So, on top of that, you get a little touch of a kind of wholemeal, brown bready sort of thing with this one. I have to admit, I would be very curious to know what type of malts they're using in this one, because it does smell a little bit American and it does smell a little bit German. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're using a little bit of crystal from German. I'm leaning toward saying this beer contains more kind of crystal malt from Germany. But there is a little bit of an almost two-row sweetness to this one. And of course, we can't discount the fact that there are malteries here in Japan as well, which I'm not madly familiar with. So yeah, there's quite a little bit of there is quite a little bit of white bready character to this one. It doesn't smell like overly fluffy or overly kind of dense or anything like that. But yeah, a little bit of fresh white bread crust, tiny touch of kind of wholemeal brown bread, maybe a little bit of like a Jacob's cream cracker or something like that. Then you've got that white bready character coming out of the malt base as well. On top of that, you start to get the more kind of brown sugary notes to this one. And as I was kind of intimating earlier, it's got a little bit of that kind of Werther's Original. There's a little touch of that Werther's Original right in the dead centre of the nose, a little bit of butterscotch, butter candy, but mainly the brown sugary notes in this beer are a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity type character. So yeah, that's quite interesting for sure. But yeah, aroma wise, I have to say the malty side of things is quite nice in this one. As I say, quite a biscuity and white bready, pardon me, leaning West Coast IPA this one, but definitely a modern take on the style actually. I think that's everything we really need to say about the malty side of the aroma. Let's go on to the hoppy side of things then. So, hoppy side of the beer, you absolutely have a little bit of you absolutely have a little bit of a kind of earthy character coming out of this one, but very, very smooth once again. You do have a little touch of herbal note in there, but I'm actually getting a nice little bit of piney resin and also a good little bit of floral aromaticity. So yeah, I do really like how that goes together. You can kind of tell from this one because the green component is more bright rather than being sort of deep and being deep and dank, if that makes sense. So yeah, you have that absolutely. So that tells you that this beer relies more on late addition and dry hopping rather than early addition hopping. So remember the three kinds of hopping: early addition hopping within the first hour of your wort boil, that gives you mainly kind of bitterness. Late addition hopping within the last half hour of the wort boil, that gives you mainly flavour and aroma, but also a little bit of bitterness. And then dry hopping gives you all flavour and aroma, and that comes after the wort boil, of course. So yeah, you can tell with this one, because of the brightness of the green component, it's relying mainly on the latter two. West Coast IPAs tend to use all three, but New England IPAs rely latter on on the other two, I should say. But yeah, at the front of the nose, absolutely a little bit of a nice kind of bright grassy sort of note to this one, freshly cut grass. But you've also got a nice bit of you've also just got some nice fruity character behind this one. So let's take a wee look at that. Yeah, I mean, for me, you've got a good little bit of there's a little touch of, I'm getting quite a bit of pineapple out of this one. I don't know if I'd go quite as far as saying it's mango, but yeah, I'm getting pineapple, I'm getting apricot out of this one. It did say American and New Zealand, it didn't say anything about Australian hops, because I would have guessed that it was maybe a little bit of Victoria's Secret in here, but if it's American, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Idaho 7, because it's got that soft tropical fruity note. I haven't had that too often in a West Coast IPA, I'll hasten to add, but yeah, I think there is a little bit of I definitely think there's a little bit of that going on in this one. So yeah, nice little bit of kind of apricot-y character, absolutely some pineapple in there, maybe a tiny wee bit of passion fruit, but I'm also getting some kind of sort of tangerine-y orangey notes, maybe a little bit of mosaic in here, could be. So a little bit of tangerine and mosaic, and potentially there's a little bit of lime as well. So could it be Motueka from New Zealand or Equinaut from the US? I'm not sure. You don't see Equinaut around these days anymore all that much. But yeah, interesting aroma this one. As I say, bit of apricot, maybe a little bit of papaya, some tangerine oranges, and a wee bit of a kind of limey character for me. But yeah, a very, very nice smelling beer, this one. As I always say, take a little bit of time to just enjoy the aroma before you get stuck in. But I think it is about time that we taste this one then. So this one is the 1 in 1,000, a 7% West Coast IPA from Tamamura Honten, Shiga Kogen beer in Yamanouchi, Nagano, Japan. And in collaboration with Pizza Port Brewing from Carlsbad, just outside of San Diego in Southern California, over in the Western US. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Oh yeah. I'm going to say straight away, that's quite an interesting one. The way that this beer develops with its aftertaste is pretty nice. And it is, as I suspected it was going to be, more of a kind of modern take on the West Coast style. Now what you'll find with this beer is when you take it in, first off it tastes very, very clean, and you're waiting for the kind of bitterness and stuff to come out, but it shows you that later on, and you'll also see that the malt base kind of sweetens up a little bit in this one. So yeah, this beer, I think, it takes a little bit of time just to show its hand, to be honest with you, and I do quite like that. I like beers that take a wee bit of time just to show you exactly what they're all about. But I can say to you straight away, this is a really solid West Coast IPA. It's not, as I've always said, I miss the bitterness that you used to get out of this particular style category, but I think they're showing you enough bitterness in this one to keep you interested and remember that this was, this is a more old school beer style actually, because of course the reason that a lot of the bitterness has dropped in many beers is because there are many new beer drinkers who've come into craft beer on the New England hazies. So yeah, that's definitely worth bearing in mind when it comes to thinking about craft beer these days. But yeah, this is a really nicely done West Coast IPA. I'm not surprised when you consider the two breweries involved in this one, but yeah. Yeah, I do like how all this goes together. So let's break this beer down and describe it a bit more in depth as we always do. So middle third of your palate then, you've got that nice little bit of a kind of fresh white bready bread crust just forming the backbone of the beer. Toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you get a little bit more of a kind of woody, you get a little bit of a more kind of woody touch out of it, and then above that you have a little bit more of you have a little bit of a more kind of wholemeal brown bready character. But the further you go into the aftertaste with this one, I think the beer does get a little bit more sort of crackery actually. Yeah, that is interesting how that goes together actually. But yeah, a little bit of bread crust, some woody notes toward the front of that middle 30 palate, then Jacob's cream cracker, a sort of wholemeal brown bready character, then above that you get a little bit of a more kind of fresh white bready note out of the beer. So yeah, I like how that goes together with this one. On top of that though, you start to get the more kind of biscuity and slightly brown sugary notes in this one. So if you go to the dead centre of your palate with this beer, there is a little bit of a kind of straight up caramel there, and that of course is the boozy. That of course is the boozy side of the beer. So a little bit of straight up caramel. As you move further out from that, you start to get more and more of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity quality. And I'm pretty sure with this beer, I'm pretty sure it will be a German crystal malt that's in this, just from the kind of type of the breadiness and things. It's not quite as oily as you'll get from the likes of American Turo. So that's interesting with this one. But it kind of makes sense, Germany and Japan have a lot of historical ties when it comes to trade and things like this. I think it is more popular in Japan to use German malt rather than American malt. And I think Japan, of course, has the trade deal with the European Union these days too. So yeah, I think German crystal malt in this one. So, I think that covers the middle third of the palate with this beer. The border region between middle and back third of your palate, again, you get a little bit of a bready build-up in this beer, sort of a mix of white bread and sort of wholemeal bread, but the base of the back third of your palate, again, is kind of bread crusty. It feels a little bit more sort of grainy as well, and then above that, you can feel there's a little bit of the cracker, but then you've got that taller layer of wholemeal brown bread, and it is quite airy. And above that, you've got the more white, the white bready character as well. So the two bready layers, as I said, are more kind of they're definitely taller on that back third of the palate, so you can feel it's a little bit taller. Then it's there, and then above that, you've got a little bit of, you almost have a little touch of a kind of more, you can feel the more yeasty esters coming out of the beer. So you've got this slightly sweet farmhousey, almost honeycomb soaked, can we call it that, bready character above all of these things on the back third of the palate. And it's quite nice. You get that sweeter character coming out the further into the aftertaste you go, and it builds a good bridge with the biscuity flavour. So yeah, back third of your palate, the flavour is definitely taller, and as you come further forward, it just condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, I like how that goes together. So back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, it's a little touch herbal, but then as you push toward the front corners of the palate, you do get quite a nice little bit of floral aromaticity coming out of the beer. You do get a touch of dankness, but there's also a good little bit of a spicy floral note to this one too. Then round the front curve of the palate, the beer is a little bit lighter and more grassy, I would say. So, yeah, definitely nice little bit of floral aromaticity in there and lighter grassiness around the front curve of the tongue. What I will say is that the green component does get a little bit wetter and things the further into the aftertaste that you go, but the whole beer sweetens up and gets more oily and wet, I would say. So yeah, I do like how this pieces together. Yeah, pretty nice. So front third of your palate then. Let's look at the fruity side of the beer. The border region between front third and middle third of your palate. Again, you get a little bit of that bready build up there. Then the base of the front third of your palate is more, I'd say it's got a little bit of a tiny little bit of bread crust in there, some smooth white bread on top of it, and then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just sort of roll their way out of the beer. So again, I quite like how that side of the beer pieces together. So yeah, that is nice. On top of that, with the fruity side of things, it's kind of oily, but it's not the most oily IPA that it's not the most oily West Coast IPA we've come across. But this one, at the back of that front third of your palate, it has got a little touch of a kind of passion fruity note to it. As you move further forward, though, it definitely shows you that more apricot-y. It shows you more of an apricot-y sort of thing. It also shows you a little bit more, it shows you a little bit more of an apricot-y sort of thing. It shows you a little bit more of a kind of papaya type note as well, actually, which is interesting. And as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, I do get a little touch of a tangerine orange out of this one, but I'm getting more of a kind of oily lime. I do want to say Motueka. I do really want to say Motueka with this one. Idaho 7 and Motueka come to mind with this beer when they're saying it's American and New Zealand. It could be a few more varieties in there, right enough. There could be a little touch of mosaic or something. But yeah, I want to say Motueka with this one. There's just something setting off my contextual memory with this. I would love to know what hops they've put in this beer. But yeah, I think that is a fair statement about this one. Yeah, a little bit of pineapple, good bit of apricot for me, little touch of passion fruit, but quite limey, and maybe a little touch of a tangerine orange. The front half of that front third of your palate is all about the lime and the little bit of orange. But yeah, as I say, very nice beer, this one. Wouldn't hesitate to drink it again. I think it's a bit of a shame if they only brew this beer once, actually. They should. That's the thing with Shiga Kogen beer. They always do some really nice one-offs, so they should try and either do more kind of similar things like that, keep experimenting, or do these beers, once every 2-3 years, rebrew them. I think that would be quite cool. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for the flavour profile of this one. Let's round off with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So, mouthfeel wise, this one, for me, it's right in the middle of the spectrum. I'd say it's mid-bodied. The carbonation is very smooth. Yeah, mid-bodied, carbonation is very smooth. It's leaning toward the oily side of things, but it's not madly oily, I would say. In terms of IBUs, it feels like it's maybe about 30-ish, 40 IBUs, something like that. But it did say in the little blurb thing that it was only calculated to 15. But yeah, you do get more bitterness out of this beer the further into the aftertaste you go. Either that, or it could just be that it's very fresh, because you will still get a little bit of that kind of greenness before the beer kind of mellows out a little bit. So yeah, you do get a good little bit of hoppy bitterness out of this one. The malt base, as we said, is a little touch grainy, also has a little bit of sweetness to it, and you've got some nice oily, fruity characters coming out of this one. But overall, I think it's a very nice beer. It shows a very nice side to the West Coast IPA, and it is, like I said, more of a kind of Russian River, Pliny the Elder type IPA for sure. So yeah, once again, I think they've done a really nice job of this. So big thumbs up to both Shiga Kogen. Alright guys, apologies for that, camera did a weird thing, but once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Tamamura Honten, Shiga Kogen beer, and from Pizza Port as well. We will no doubt return to both of these breweries at some point in the future, but in the meantime, make sure you try out some of their beers, check out my social media, check out the brewery's social media, and I will see you guys in the next review. The 1 in 1,000, 7% West Coast IPA from Tamamura Honten, Shiga Kogen beer in Yamanouchi, Nagano, Japan, and Pizza Port Brewing from Carlsbad near San Diego in California in the western US. Slàinte, skål, cheers, kampai. See you guys in the next review.